Let me take you back to a time when the sky itself was at war. Cities trembled beneath thunder that came not from storms but from engines above them. The night glowed red as fire rained down upon London. The year was 1940. The world was burning. Britain stood alone, her cities shattered, her people. Exhausted, the Blitz had turned homes into dust and hope into a fragile whisper. But in the smoke of ruin, something unbreakable began to stir, the spirit of invention, the will to fight not with numbers or might, but with imagination. In secret hangars and small workshops across the countryside, men and women worked by candlelight, their hands trembling not from fear but determination. Among them stood a man who saw possibility where others saw only limits. Geoffrey de Havilland, an aircraft designer with the mind of an engineer and the heart of a dreamer. He watched the bombers tear through the sky and thought, speed, that's what will save us, not armor, not guns, but speed. The faster we move, the less they can touch us. The idea was madness, a wooden plane in the age of steel. Yet madness was exactly what the moment demanded. While others built heavier and stronger machines, de Havilland whispered a different truth: lighter, faster, smarter. And as the bombs fell, he and his small team began crafting something the enemy could not predict, a machine not forged from iron, but carved from courage. The people laughed at first. They called it fragile, foolish, even suicidal. But de Havilland's eyes held a different fire, the kind that sees beyond logic into destiny. He said, "We'll build a plane that no one can catch." And so, in the heart of Britain's darkest hour, as the world burned, a miracle began to take shape. The legend of the wooden wonder was about to rise. The winter of 1940 was bitter. Cold wind swept through Britain's factories, carrying whispers of fear and fatigue. Metal was running out, steel was reserved for Spitfires and tanks, aluminum for bombers and ships. The nation was stretched thin, and yet Geoffrey de Havilland refused to give up. He stood inside a quiet workshop in Hatfield, surrounded by planks of spruce and birch. The air smelled of sawdust and machine oil. Around him were craftsmen, not soldiers. Their hands once shaped the furniture of English homes, but now they shaped the bones of a dream. De Havilland's voice was calm yet certain. "We will build it from wood. We will make it light and fast." The others looked uncertain. Some smiled in disbelief. But slowly the idea began to breathe life, stirred among the timber stacks. The impossible was being born. The plan was bold. The frame of the aircraft would be molded, plywood, layers of Canadian birch glued together with precision. Its skin would be smooth, its surface polished to slip through the air with almost no resistance, and at its heart would roar two Rolls Royce Merlin engines, the same that powered the Spitfire. But this aircraft would fly faster, much faster. They called it the DH-98 Mosquito, a small name, something destined to sting giants. Its creators worked day and night through air raids and blackouts, crafting parts by hand, painting them by lamplight. Every curve, every rivet was shaped with purpose. This was no ordinary plane. It was a message, a declaration that Britain would not be broken. When the first prototype rolled out, it gleamed under the pale morning light. It was sleek, fragile, beautiful. Some said it looked too delicate to fight, but de Havilland smiled. He knew what they did not, that true strength often hides beneath elegance. He climbed into the cockpit that day, heart steady, hands sure. The engines roared to life and the wooden frame trembled with power. The Mosquito lifted off the ground, silent and swift as a whisper. And in that moment Britain's sky no longer belonged to the enemy. It belonged to the dreamers. The news of a wooden aircraft taking flight spread quickly across the halls of the Air Ministry. To many it sounded like a joke. To others it was a reckless gamble. How could a plane made of ply would outfly the Luftwaffe? Steel Titans officials scoffed. They wanted more guns, more armor, more metal. The Mosquito had none of it, no terror. It's no gunners, just speed and nerve. They said it would burn the moment it met gunfire. They said it would splinter against the wind. De Havilland listened quietly to every word, then simply said, "Let us show you." The tests began at dawn on a cold morning. The Mosquito sliced through the mist, rising like a silver ghost across the sky. The pilot pushed the throttle, and the engine screamed with defiance. Within seconds, it was gone, vanishing into the horizon, faster than the radar could track. It was faster than the Spitfire, faster than the Messerschmitt 109, faster than any plane that had ever touched the clouds. When it returned, the field was silent. The engineers watched in disbelief. Their instruments confirmed what their eyes could not. The Mosquito was not just fast, it was untouchable still. The ministry hesitated. They said speed alone was not enough, but war has a way of silencing doubt. When Britain needed a plane that could strike deep into enemy territory and return unseen, the Mosquito became the answer. It was sent on its first mission, not as a fighter, but as a reconnaissance aircraft flying unarmed over enemy territory. Cameras replacing guns it photographed factories, rail lines, and airfields deep inside occupied Europe, and not a single German fighter could catch it. Pilots who flew it began to whisper stories of how they outran squadrons of enemy interceptors, how the Mosquito danced through gunfire. As if made of light, the wooden plane was proving the world wrong somewhere in Germany. Hermann Göring heard of it, the mighty Luftwaffe commander who had promised total air supremacy scoffed at first, but when reports poured in of British planes outpacing his best fighters, he grew restless. He demanded to know how a wooden aircraft could humiliate his steel empire. Soon that restlessness would turn to rage and envy. Wooden wonder had begun to haunt his pride inside the marble corridors of Berlin. Power echoed in rage. Hermann Göring, the once unshakable commander of the Luftwaffe, paced furiously before his generals. His pride was wounded. His voice thundered through the room. How is it possible that the British had built a plane our fighters cannot catch? A wooden plane. He slammed his fist against the table, and the room fell silent, his face red with fury, his words dripping with disbelief. He had promised Hitler total control of the skies, promised that no British aircraft would dare to fly above German soil. Yet reports told a different story. British Mosquitoes were appearing everywhere, striking with precision and vanishing before the German radar could react. They bombed Gestapo headquarters. They destroyed radio stations. They photographed secret bases and flew home untouched. Göring's air force, built on years of dominance, was suddenly being mocked by a machine made of plywood and glue. He ordered his engineers to study it, to copy it, to build something faster, but Germany's war machine was weighed down by bureaucracy and pride. Their factories were built for heavy steel, not light timber. Their commanders still believed that might came from armor and guns, not agility and grace. As the Mosquito raids grew bolder, the German people began to whisper of a ghost plane. They said it came from nowhere, struck like lightning, and disappeared into the clouds. The Luftwaffe tried to catch it, but failed. Time after time for Göring it was more than defeat. It was humiliation. In one infamous speech, his bitterness spilled into the open. He growled, "The British have a wooden plane that flies circles around our best fighters. What do you think I feel when I see that I turn green and yellow with envy?" The single moment captured the truth of the war. Pride had blinded power, innovation had humbled arrogance, and the world's most feared air marshal had been brought low not by fire or metal, but by wood in the skies over Europe. The Mosquito had become more than a machine. It was a symbol, a reminder that intelligence and courage could outfly even the mightiest empire. The Mosquito earned its name in whispers, and all pilots called it the ghost in the clouds because it struck fast and vanished before the echo of its engines faded. Its light wooden frame reflected little on radar. Its speed made interception almost impossible. It was not just an aircraft, it was an illusion made real. British aircrews learned to trust its silence. The moment they lifted off, they knew they were flying something extraordinary. The Mosquito could fly higher than enemy fighters. It could glide through flak storms and weave through tracer fire. Its wooden skin absorbed sound, turning it almost invisible against the roar of war. It became the master of surprise. It could take off from a base in England, cross the Channel, strike a target in the heart of occupied Europe, and be home before the enemy even sounded. Alarmed German observers often mistook it for a bird until it unleashed its sting, a pair of bombs dropped with surgical precision in daylight raids. It danced across the horizon at treetop, level so low that branches would sometimes scrape its belly. Pilots remembered flying so close to the earth, could see the faces of startled German soldiers as they passed. The Mosquito's wings cut through mist and smoke like knives through silk. Every mission built its legend. It bombed Gestapo prisons to free captured resistance fighters. It crippled communication lines before D-Day. It shattered enemy morale without ever needing a dogfight. To the Germans, it was a phantom. To the British, it was a guardian angel. Its crews were young men barely out of school, but their courage aged them quickly. They trusted their wooden wings more than armor. They said, "If you can see the Mosquito, you've already lost." Night after night they returned from the firestorms, their planes riddled but still flying. It was as if the wood itself refused to burn. The Mosquito did not just change the skies, it changed the way war was fought, proving that elegance and ingenuity could outwit brute force. It was no longer just a plane, it was Britain's answer to despair. By 1943, The Mosquito had become the beating heart of the Royal Air Force's most daring missions. It no longer had to prove itself, the world already knew its legend, but now it would show what precision truly meant. This was not a bomber built to destroy cities. It was built to strike with accuracy measured in heartbeats. It could deliver its payload through a single window. It could hit a bridge without touching the street beside it. The Mosquito was not just a weapon, it was a scalpel. On the morning of February 27th, 1942, two Mosquitoes crossed the North Sea. Under a curtain of cloud, their mission to bomb the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, Norway. Their orders were exact: strike the heart of the building, destroy the records of resistance fighters, but spare the civilians near. By they approached low and silent beneath the German radar. The city was calm, unaware of what was coming. Then the roar of engines shattered the morning peace. Two bombs fell slicing through the roof. A flash, a tremor, and the center of Nazi intelligence in Norway was gone. When the smoke cleared, the surrounding buildings stood untouched. The raid was a message. Precision was power. Missions that followed became even bolder. Mosquitoes struck Gestapo prisons in France, demolishing walls to help prisoners escape. They raided train yards and command centers, hitting only what mattered. They even bombed Berlin in daylight, flying faster than Göring's fighters could climb the German air. Defenses were humiliated, their flak guns too slow, their raid too blind, their interceptors too late. Göring's pride cracked a little more with every raid. But what made the Mosquito truly terrifying was its silence. No warning, no siren, no time to react. It appeared, it struck, and it was gone, a blur of speed and willpower. For the men who flew it, every mission carried the weight of risk. They flew without armor, knowing one bullet could end it all, but they trusted in their machine. And in each other. The Mosquito was no longer just a marvel of engineering. It had become a philosophy, a belief that precision, humanity, and courage could still exist in a world drowning in chaos. By 1944, the tide of war had begun to shift. The Allies were no longer fighting for survival, they were fighting for victory. And in that turning tide, the Mosquito became a symbol of momentum. It flew in every role imaginable. Bomber, fighter, reconnaissance, pathfinder. It carried cameras, guns, and hope. It guided fleets of bombers through night skies, marking targets with pinpoint accuracy. It hunted German night fighters that once stalked British bombers in the dark. Its versatility made it irreplaceable. No other aircraft could do so much with so little. In the black of night, Mosquito crews navigated by starlight and courage, gliding through enemy searchlights that painted the sky in white death. Each time the beams swept across the clouds, the pilots dropped lower, their wooden wings slicing through the air like whispers of vengeance. The Mosquito's success was no accident. It was the result of minds that refused to accept limb. Its Geoffrey de Havilland had built not just a machine, but a movement. Every engineer, every carpenter, every pilot felt they were part of something greater than themselves. As the Allies prepared for D-Day, the Mosquito played its part with silent precision. It struck radar stations along the French coast, confusing German defenses. It photographed beaches and bunkers, delivering images that would guide the invasion. It flew false bombing runs to draw fighters away from Normandy. Its wooden wings became the quiet architects of freedom in Germany. Göring watched in frustration. His once mighty Luftwaffe was breaking apart under the weight of Allied innovation. He had steel, they had imagination, and in war, imagination was winning. The Mosquito's shadow stretched across Europe, from fjords of Norway to the streets of Berlin. It flew higher, farther, faster than anyone dreamed possible. And every time it returned from the fire unscathed, it carried with it a truth that could not be denied, that the strength of a nation lies not in its resources, but in its resolve. The tide was turning. The wooden wonder had become the wind that carried victory sent across the skies of war. The final years of the war were chaos on a scale the world had never seen. Cities lay in ruins, armies crumbled, empires trembled. But in that storm of collapse, the Mosquito flew stronger than ever. Its wooden wings, now symbols of endurance, of defiance, of victory in motion. By 1945, the Mosquito had become the sharp edge of Allied precision, striking deep into the heart of Germany. It targeted rail lines, bridges, command posts, and airfields. It didn't bomb blindly. It chose its blows like a swordsman, striking only where it mattered. On one mission, Mosquito crews flew to destroy the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen. The target stood in the middle of the city, surrounded by schools and homes. The risk was enormous, but the stakes even higher. Resistance fighters were imprisoned inside, their names recorded in Files that meant death, the mosquitoes flew low across the sea, barely above the waves. The crews could feel the spray of salt against their windows when they reached the city. They rose just enough to aim. The first wave hit precisely, but tragedy followed. One plane clipped a lamppost, crashed into a school, and flames engulfed the street. Yet even amid disaster, the mission continued. The target was destroyed, the prisoners freed. The cost was heavy, but the message, eternal courage, demands sacrifice. In those final months, the Mosquito's reputation became legend. German soldiers feared its hum in distance. Pilots spoke of it with awe. Enemy radar operators cursed its name. They said it appeared out of nowhere like a shadow that struck and vanished when Germany's cities burned, and its war machine shattered. The Mosquito still flew through the smoke, guiding bombers, delivering supplies, rescuing the wounded. Its wooden frame bore the scars of 1,000 missions, yet it refused to break, and as peace crept closer, as the guns began to fall silent, the Mosquito remained aloft, a guardian, watching the war it helped to end. It was more than wood and glue, now it was spirit carved into the sky. The world had seen enough of destruction. Now it was time to remember what imagination and courage could build. When the war finally fell silent, and the world began to rebuild, the Mosquito's song lingered in the air. It had flown more than 27,000 missions across every front of the war. It had photographed the enemy's secrets, bombed their strongholds, and carried messages of hope through the darkest skies. It had done what no one thought possible. Geoffrey de Havilland stood on an airfield one dawn watching a Mosquito return from its final wartime mission. Its engines hummed like an old melody, scarred wings glinting in the rising light around him. Workers who once shaped its wooden bones from sawdust and sweat now stood in quiet pride. They had built something that would outlive the war. The Mosquito's legacy was not only in its victories, but in its message. It proved that genius could thrive under pressure, that simplicity could outsmart complexity, that courage could be crafted from the humblest materials. It was a triumph not of technology alone, but of spirit. Its design would inspire generations of aircraft to come. Jet engineers studied its frame, its aerodynamics, its daring use of materials. What began as a desperate gamble became a blueprint for innovation. Even decades later, pilots would speak of its perfect balance of speed, grace, and control. No aircraft before or since has captured the same harmony of art and function, but its truest legacy lived in the hearts of those who flew it. They remembered the sound of its engines rising through the night, the hum of the wooden wings, the way it seemed alive. They said it wasn't just a plane, it was a friend for Germany. The Mosquito remained a bitter reminder that pride is no match for imagination for Britain. It became a symbol of survival, of brilliance born from hardship for the world. It became a lesson carved in the skies. The wooden wonder had haunted Göring's pride, but it had also awakened something greater, the belief that even in the face of destruction, humanity could still create beauty. The war ended, but echoes of its machines never truly faded across the fields of England, where grass now grows through the cracks of old runways. The ghosts of the Mosquito still hum in the wind. Every flight, every mission, every whisper of its engines carries the memory of those who dared to dream when the world was drowning in darkness. The Mosquito did not roar like the bombers that came before it. It sang a softer song, one of precision, courage, and faith. It was proof that brilliance could rise from scarcity, that humanity could craft victory not from power, but from purpose. In museums today, its wooden frame gleams beneath soft light. Visitors walk around it in silence, running their hands along its smooth curves, wondering how something so delicate could survive the storms of war. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear it still, the faint hum of Merlin engines, the heartbeat of innovation. Geoffrey Havilland once said, "We built it to be light, but it carried the weight of a nation." Those words became prophecy. The Mosquito carried not just bombs or cameras, it carried belief for the men who flew it. The memories never left: the rush of wind, the flash of tracer fire, the endless sky stretching toward dawn. Some said that when the engine started, it felt like the plane itself wanted to live, wanted to fight, wanted to fly for something greater than survival. And perhaps that was its true magic. It was built from the simplest of materials, but driven by the rarest of forces, faith in human potential. Even now, the Mosquito's story stands as a reminder that ingenuity can rise from ashes, that courage can be carved from fear, that hope can fly on wooden wings. It haunted Göring's pride, but it lifted a nation's soul. And as long as we remember the dreamers who built it and the heroes who flew it, the wooden wonder will never truly land, because legends like these don't fade, they echo forever in the sky.